everyone, what is up? It is me, Ewan, from What Culture Star Wars, today with another episode of the What Culture Star Wars podcast. Today, as well, joined by the bodacious Ben Roy Turner. Say hello, Ben Roy.
Long live the Empire.
Long live the Empire. Yes, we have seen another episode of The Mandalorian Season 2 aired today, Chapter 11, or The Heiress, and we are both big fans. This is going to be a lovely little in-depth discussion into the episode. So if you haven't seen it yet, you should probably just turn around and maybe scran some baby frog eggs and then just go and watch it, because it's great. It's really good. Ups and Downs at this point should be live on the What Culture main channel, so I'd encourage you to check out my review for the show there. But this will be a nice little in-depth discussion regarding it. Ben Roy, what did you think of Season 2, Episode 3?
Massive up for no baby murder this episode, I'm going to say straight off the bat. No baby
character development.
Yeah, there was almost like an arc there. But no, watching this from the outset, it seemed... I was worried for like the first maybe 5 seconds of the episode, where is this going to be let's get the ship fixed episode? And as soon as a certain event happened, he's like, oh no, this is going in a totally different direction. And from there on, I guess I'll leave you to reveal this moment in just a second. I was all in, and even I've got to say, for the wrestling fans out there, seeing one wrestler named Sasha Banks popping up, and her being someone who from the trailers made her look like she might be a Jedi, but then, no, she's not. She's someone totally different. This one hit out of the park, unlike last week.
Yeah. So for those who need a little bit of context, obviously at the end of the last episode, Mando gets his busted ass Peugeot of the skies into space to slowly crawl his way across to this planet, which I keep on forgetting the name of the planet, but it's populated by the Mon Calamari people and the Quarrens who share the same space, but whatever. They make it to the planet. They have a very choppy re-entry, which I thought was very tense and interesting, and I was terrified that her bloody eggs would crash all over the floor. Literally, as she's just there looking bad, as she's trying to hold on to the lever, I was like, honestly, you can't put this poor frog woman through any more torture. But whatever.
After all that, after the last
exactly.
Spiders.
But whatever, they make it down. They reunite Frog Lady and Frog Husband, which is a very sweet moment. I really like that. And then they point Mando in the direction of a local Quarren barkeep who dispenses chowder out of these tubes that are all over the ceiling, which I'm a big fan of. And then he points them to another Quarren who's like, sure, I can help you find other Mandalorians. And that is literally how he sounds. And they go on a nice little boat trip, only it's not so nice because the Quarrens betray them and kick baby. They put the child like he's a seal just into the depths of this giant squid monster, and you think it's all very sad and mean, and then obviously the big reveal of the episode: the Mandalorians in question are indeed on this planet, and are not just any old Mandalorians. No. This is Bo-Katan and her Mandalorian brethren. And Bo-Katan, obviously, if you like Star Wars, if you like Star Wars The Clone Wars, if you like Star Wars Rebels, she is a huge deal, voiced by Katie Sackhoff in both The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. And she, of course, reprises her role in live action. And I have to say, Ben Roy, I was giddy. I made all sorts of ridiculous noises when I saw her just come out to the screen. And I knew it was her from the armor, but when she took the mask off, the helmet off, I was like, yes, it's Bo-Katan. She's here. And I know it was all spoiled by casting leaks a year ago, but that still doesn't make the fact that we've got another great expanded universe character. Obviously, Cobb Vanth was in the first episode, and now we've got Bo-Katan, and it was just amazing.
So much like in episode 9 when Rey and Kylo could sort of feel each other through the Force, I felt like I was in the room with you when that happened, because I knew at that point that you'd be jumping for joy out of your seat.
We're the dyads.
Yeah. And someone like me who's watched about 74 million of the 4 billion episodes of the Clone Wars so far, I've made it through most of it, but I still haven't delved all the way in, and even through Rebels. Rebels, I've dived in to points I've watched a lot of the Maul stuff. I've watched a lot of the Mando stuff through in passing on Cartoon Network when we had it here, or say on YouTube. And even I was excited for this, because seeing characters like this being realized in just real life, which has been I don't know, I'm trying to think of the word, but I can't. And looking so genuine, it just fitting in straight away. And I thought it might be jarring bringing a lot of the Clone Wars or Rebel stuff in, just because we're so used to these characters in
Mm.
CGI. But it just fit straight away, and it was an awesome entrance. But I'm also worried about Frog Lady, because was Frog Lady lying the entire time to Mando? Because it doesn't seem like that her contact ever knew the Mandalorians were there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they would have known that there was the Mandalorian pirates in the area kind of harassing Imperial ships. I kind of inferred that from there. And then he pointed them to the barkeep, who I guess... I don't think the husband was in on the conspiracy to get the best scar off Mando. But no, again, I totally agree. It was such a cool reveal. And as someone, it's difficult for me because I'm a massive Star Wars dork, you're a massive Star Wars dork. We're aware of how all these characters and how they exist and stuff.
Yeah.
But I am most curious to hear what people who aren't familiar with these characters kind of react to their introductions. Personally, I think, trying to remove my own kind of association and love for the Clone Wars and Rebels, I still think they introduced them very organically. They introduced the mystery of the Darksaber and revealed Bo-Katan's connection to that, which I thought was interesting. Obviously, if you were aware of Star Wars Rebels, that Bo-Katan gets the Darksaber in that show. And I was very fearful that when they announced that Katie Sackhoff was going to be in this series, I had kind of fearful that maybe it would have been a flashback, that we would have seen Moff Gideon kill Bo-Katan to get the Darksaber, but I'm relieved that's not the case, and it's really cool how they're building towards that massive conflict between the Mandalorian clans and Gideon. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves there. I kind of wanted to touch on a really important moment that I liked that came when they took their helmets off. Now, we've known for a while now that Din Djarin was adopted by Death Watch, the eponymous Mandalorian terrorist group who were all traditionalists. If you're aware of the Clone Wars, they were led by a man called Pre Vizsla, who was actually played by Jon Favreau, so that's a nice little connection there. He was, I think he was supposedly an ancestor of Tar Vizsla, who was the first, Mandalorian Jedi who had the Darksaber. And basically Death Watch wanted to take down the Mandalorian government, who had pursued a policy of neutrality and pacifism during the Clone Wars, and restore Mandalore to its former, glory days of waging war and, terrifying Jedi and whatever. And obviously, you'll remember in that show that Bo-Katan was a member of Death Watch. She was kind of had a feud with her sister, Duchess Satine Kryze, who was obviously Obi-Wan's love, who doesn't exactly get a happy ending in the Clone Wars. And you'll remember that Pre Vizsla, Bo-Katan, and Gar Saxon, who is the one remaining member of Death Watch who kind of allies with Maul when Maul takes over the group, they were all taking their helmets off on and off all the time. But it's interesting to me that, they kind of go into a bit of lore here. And there was a confusion in Mandalorian season 1 where they introduced that whole thing of, Mandalorians don't ever take their helmet off, when we're like, well, we've just seen these characters do it all the time. And the explanation here is that Din was a child of the Watch. And I'm going to assume here, I'm just inferring that all children of the Watch were raised to be, quote unquote, better or more traditional Mandalorians than the adult members of Death Watch, taught to kind of honor the ways of the original Mandalore and never take off your helmet. And I kind of liked how that made Din more of an outsider in this episode. He's not familiar with any of the Mandalorians bar his original clan, who I assume must all also be children of the Watch. So I thought that was interesting. How did you read that?
Yeah, as soon as they took the helmets off, I was like, oh, here we go. And he just straight up abandons them. Like, he's been looking for Mandalorians this whole time, this whole season. And he just like, nah, I'm not having any of this. You've taken your helmet off. See you later. I said, wow. And only after they sort of like save him again and then sort of tease him in there with sort of promises of more leads, does he actually sort of like side of them. And even then it's sort of like, well, kind of, but not kind of. And it's good to see. But I also thought in the back of my mind, this is gonna keep the name of the actor who plays Din is
Pedro Pascal,
because there's been rumors that he wanted to take his helmet off more. Like, it seems like this is going to lead into a way that he's going to be able to do it.
That's what I'm guessing as well.
Like, I don't know, this obviously this wasn't planned, but obviously this now opens up for him to accept that he can show his face. And I don't know, does that ever lead into him going back to the jungle planet where they fought the ATST and meeting certain people there that he hid his face from and things like that? And just this internal conflict is just adding like a nice another layer to the show, where you kind of like, this is the way, no helmet off there, that's it, done. And will he ever come into contact with some of the other Mandalorians that he was with back in season 1, and will they see him with his helmet off, and will that cause issues? And there's so many things that can come from just the sheer fact that does this main character of a show take his helmet off? And it's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the cool things I'm looking forward to with this season is Dinn building his own clan and really kind of learning what it means to be a Mandalorian and how it goes beyond just tradition and doing noble deeds. You know, even to begin with, when he was originally a Mandalorian, you know, he wasn't exactly the most ethical bounty hunter in the world, and you know, he's still constantly learning to be the Mando that the child needs. And again, I think that's really interesting that he has gone from, you know, because he wasn't born on Mandalore. He has now come to associate with an imposter who was wearing Mandalorian armor of potentially someone who wasn't a real Mandalorian in Cobb Vanth and Boba Fett. And now we've got him interacting with the most prestigious, most, you know, elegant Mandalorians there are in Clan Kryze and Lady Bo-Katan, who is the rightful ruler of Mandalore, given that she wielded the Darksaber. So I just thought it was really interesting, and I'm looking forward to see how, potentially, given what we know with Ahsoka, which we'll get to in a second, and what she got up to at the end of Star Wars Rebels, there is, of course, another Mandalorian who you could potentially interact with there as well. So given I've given the goose away, at the end of the episode, Bo-Katan reveals to Din Djarin that the Jedi that she knows is Ahsoka Tano. Now, at the end of Star Wars Rebels, and this might be a spoiler, because even though you're probably going to get bits and bobs of Star Wars Rebels in The Mandalorian Season 2, I do want to preface that this might be a spoiler if you're planning on watching that series after, you know, seeing the Mando Season 2. But at the end of Star Wars Rebels, are you okay with this, Ben Moran? I should probably clarify this with you first.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen so many bits and bobs, it's fine. Yeah.
So at the end of Star Wars Rebels, Ezra Bridger, who's one of the main characters, one of the Jedi Knights of the show, basically takes up Grand Admiral Thrawn into hyperspace, into the unknown regions with the Purgils, who the Purgils are basically like giant space whales who create and ride their own hyperspace lanes. And at the end of the episode, Ahsoka and Sabine, this picks up after Return of the Jedi, they basically go, we're going to go find Ezra Bridger. We're going to go try and find our friend. And there's all sorts of stuff with the Force that's coming in with here. It's very exciting. And there have been rumors of a Star Wars Rebels sequel series for a while now, potentially to come after the Bad Batch show debuts next year. So again, I'm curious to see just how much Rebel stuff they put in when Ahsoka appears, because I imagine if, you know, it's several years after Episode 6 at this point now, I'm curious to see, how did their search for Ezra go? Is she still with Sabine? Are they, you know, kind of still searching for him? And how is she going to take a quote-unquote interruption if this Mandalorian comes along and is like, here, have my baby? You know what I mean? So how do you think Ahsoka's going to play at this?
I think Ahsoka's probably going to turn up at the very last episode. But it's so interesting, because once you introduce a Jedi to a series like this, like, it's almost like Ahsoka wins, lol. I don't know. I think so. Like, if Ahsoka helps, say, Dinn, friend of Moff Gideon, to get the Darksaber back, or I think the series might, like, they're bringing Ahsoka in, and it might lead to a tease of them trying to claim Mandalore or claim parts of it, or fight back some of the more Imperial resistance. What I'd like to see is this be a bridge series to season 3, if that makes sense. I don't want things like Moff Gideon to be sort of eradicated in the series yet, and sort of things. It's so interesting, because I don't know how, again, like, I like Jedi to be treated as they are. They basically destroy, and they can win sort of a lot of battles unless you've got so specific troopers designed for certain things or anything like that. So I'm so interested in, so I can find out how they're going to bring something like that into such a grounded show so far. Like, even having the jetpack at the very end of last season felt like they were stepping the show up a level. Now it feels like we're just about to go, we've kind of gone up a level already, and we're going to go up again. So it's just seeing how these are going to play into the next few episodes. It's like, and we still got Boba Fett hanging around. Like, I don't know what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the one consolation I can give you there is that in order to get the Darksaber ethically, you have to defeat your opponent in single combat. So I would assume that Bo-Katan will face Moff Gideon closer towards the end of the series, or at least I would hope so. You know, there is also the maybe the thought that maybe Dinn will fight Moff Gideon, although I don't think he wants the responsibility of ruling Mandalore or whatever, even though the show is called The Mandalorian, so maybe that's what they're building to. I have no idea. On the topic of just the fact that, Moff Gideon was around in this episode, and it's just great to see Giancarlo Esposito just having a great time because he's just wonderful. I'm really fascinated by just the history that I really want. The main takeaway I had from this episode wasn't really just, oh my God, I'm so excited to see Bo-Katan. Oh my God, I'm so excited to see Ahsoka Tano. I was really curious to learn more about his history with Mandalore and why he's got such a deep connection with Mandalore in terms of, he was involved in the Mandalorian purges. I want to know how far back his ties go, because it seems as though he is mostly concerned with Mandalorian clans and how he came into possession of the Darksaber. That's obviously I'm still really excited and interested to learn all about, looking for other Mandalorians and finding out more of the child's origins. But right now, the main takeaway that I have is wow, I want to know the beef between Bo-Katan and Moff Gideon. I need to know more of this.
I also like that he's not a bumbling Imperial. He seems like he's clever, and he seems like Tarkin-esque. He seems Thrawn-esque. He seems like a mid in between both of them, where he's a hell of a lot more violent, and I like a compelling a baddie that can sort of hold their own and is just scared, and this show was already so interesting. And then I'm not saying my interest leans on the interest of that now, but Moff Gideon is sort of the specter in the background that everything I feel is going to lead up to, whether it is on Mandalore at some point or around that sort of so the Mandalorian sort of who's going to claim back the saber. We've seen duels like this in, was it Rebels when Maul faced it passes my name off for the darks for the
that was in Clone Wars. Maul fought Pre Vizsla to get the Darksaber, and
seeing scenes like that, seeing can Moff Gideon hold his own in a fight like that against someone, whether it be any of our main cast, he is just he's now become one of my most interesting Imperials. I want to read him. I want to have a book about him. I want this, I want that. I want more. I don't need to. I know shows shouldn't lean on supplementary stuff, films shouldn't lean on books to explain everything in the background or Fortnite. But I really want to know more about his character, and he's up there as one of my favorite sort of Star Wars villains already, and he's just so compelling. And John Carter plays the bad guy in everything I've seen him in so perfectly now.
Yeah, he's just so good. I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of him in this show. And one thing I kind of also wanted to point out with this episode is that I thought it was another stellar effort from Bryce Dallas Howard. She did the chapter 4 in season 1, the Seven Samurai episode, which I thought was very good at the time. But again, I kind of thought that whereas the first 2 episodes, and not to say that I didn't like them because I did, even last week's, which kind of I kind of want to say that both of those previous episodes that we've had, they kind of meandered and weirdly in different places. And even though they certainly felt cinematic at times, there were moments where it definitely felt a little bit static. This episode, I thought, was one of the most cinematic Mandalorian installments we've had so far. And that might be down to the fact that it was very action heavy. We got a lot of great sequences or whatever, but I genuinely think, Bryce Dallas Howard did a really good job with this episode. And I love the fact that the show is pooling together so many different talents and filmmakers in terms of who else gets to do what. But yeah, it definitely felt tighter to me as an episode, even though it was still written by Jon Favreau.
I will say that what this show is doing is humanizing a lot of the alien races within Star Wars as well, rather than just making squealing noises. We're having conversations with some of them now. Yeah. It was great having the Salacious Crumb-esque thing on the Spitfire last season, but just nice to see if just as I was with Star Wars feeling more lived in and feel more like it's an environment and there's danger around every corner, even for someone like Din Djarin. But yeah, the whole cinematic vibe I drive with. But I also like how they can sort of simply solve problems, just to open a door and just shovel the Imperials out of a vent, sort of thing, things like that. But then I don't know if the Imperial guy was named who was leading that cruiser. Who was ordered by Moff Gideon to basically just nosedive it. Nah, just give up now. I'd rather have it destroyed than let it fall into the hands of the Mandalorian. And as he sort of I think in old spy thrillers, especially around the Second World War, some people could have cyanide capsules in their molars, and him sort of biting down and shocking himself, reminded me of that sort of espionage thing going on around that sort of time. And I really do feel they might not harken on Moff Gideon be so much of like an actual Nazi, even though we know like the Imperials are kind of like space Nazis. But I feel like he's gonna fall into obsession of like I think his whole thing is like, nah, the Mandalorian stuff, this is all like they're a warrior race, but I can prove that I'm better than them, sort of thing.
Yeah, I wonder if he's just fascinated with Mandalorian culture. I wonder if that's a dynamic that's going on there. And like you said, he kind of wants to almost like dominate the planet and take on their culture. It was with Thrawn, his whole motivation really was that he was curious and respectful. Obviously, that didn't manifest in the most healthy ways ever, but there was a core element of respect there. I'm curious to see whether Gideon feels the same way or not.
It's funny with Thrawn because he's always playing like two games where he's trying to be like in with the Emperor and Vader and everyone else, but he's also doing this so it detracts from them ever being attracted to his clan out in the party out room. Like he's trying to like help them so that there's no conflict there, and like we've seen this in like some of the I think it's, the second Aftermath book. Name escapes me. I'm very sorry, but the Imperial who is controlling Kashyyyk, like he's obsessed with controlling Kashyyyk and be like the strongest on that planet, and he will fight to the last man, even though when like the whole galaxy's lost. But I like how these Imperial sort of like Imperials are scattered across the galaxy, and without the galaxy being sort of the goal now, is the planet or their section of it, and they're going to hold on to they're dug in, they're entrenched, and they're not letting go.
Yeah, I mean that's been one of the most exciting things for me reading a bunch of the expanded universe stuff. It's kind of been learning more about that transition between the New Republic and the Empire going into the First Order and the Resistance, and looking at how the Imperials were very factionalized. You have obviously Ray Sloan, who was like kind of the big guiding force of the main Imperial contingent, but you definitely had a lot of the case where with no emperor to terrorize them, all these power hungry madmen were desperate to exert whatever control they could have. So again, that's another interesting element. Is Moff Gideon beholden to the Imperial dream, as it were, or is this more of a personal thing? The fact that he was able to kind of say long live the Empire and get his busy mate to choke on an electric cyanide pill or whatever it was kind of implies that he is still beholden to the Imperial legacy. But like you said, I'm so fascinated by the character, and I automatically want to learn more about him.
Yeah, and I feel like it's weird because if there was like, say, there's always scope to Star Wars when Lucas first wrote the screenplay and stuff. There's more of the grand effects. I feel like someone like a Tarkin might have not gone in that first film, sort of thing. And I feel like almost like Moff Gideon is reliving this sort of fantasy of like, not fantasy, but this sort of like this higher up sort of Imperial that is, frankly, as we know now, just a human who is sort of like, I think because he's so well known that when every time his name is uttered, someone either sort of like shivers or is like, well, I'm gonna off myself because I could take you to them, but then I'm just gonna get eradicate anyway. So I'd rather die now. I'd rather get electrocuted in the face than meet Moff Gideon and have him lecture me about an E11 repeating blaster or something like that.
Yeah, those were new guns that those were new blasters that we saw on that ship there. I don't think we've seen those before. They were like a mixture between the heavy blasters we've seen in the First Order and the ones that we've seen in the traditional Imperial arsenal. I will say, before we wrap this up, I've got two things that I kind of want to talk about. One is the speculate. We'll speculate on the next episode in a little bit, but I kind of want to talk about the child briefly as well. And one of the theories that's been going around recently is that the child is showing more and more signs of kind of being drawn towards the dark side. And I thought that was definitely kind of accentuated by last week's episode, but the fact that he was literally like eating that poor frog lady's children. But conversely, in this episode, we got to see him kind of learn and grow a little bit. He gets to live with the frog people for about a day, and gets to look as the eggs hatch into cute little tadpoles and then into frogs. And I don't think he was trying to eat the frog when it was jumping around. At least I hope not. But
kill is what the child was saying. Kill.
He's just so hungry, man. He just wants to eat everything. But yeah. What do you think about the child's usage here? Because I thought it wasn't, whenever you have a really cutesy character, there's always a danger that you'll just insert it for the pops and just kind of, have it detract from the main story. But I thought the way they were used here was very natural and organic and charming, and I am quite liking the development, however subtle it may be, that we're getting with the character.
very reserved here. I don't, because I was afraid that the child was going to become like I'm going to just force heal you the whole
Yeah.
time sort of thing. And I loved when the child was kicked into the water. I was like, that's what you get for murdering children,
Ben
you
Roy
little.
Turner, I loved when the child was kicked into the water.
Yeah.
2020.
And the giant, scary monster thing just came over. Oh, nope, see you later. Like, there's no tension there because obviously, that's not how the child's going to end. But I laughed because, like, that's what you get for murdering people. That's what you get for murdering kids.
He
And
did get absolutely punted, like.
yeah, it was so good. It's like, boom, gone.
Yeah.
No, I liked it. It was reserved, and they don't feel the need to let's take the child onto the raiding mission because imagine them all flying up and they're just this ball.
Just recreate the bit from Fast and Furious with Jason Statham and the baby.
Yeah, but no, I like that the child can be sort of like left to the side for an episode, and I thought it was good. I thought it was good use of child, and obviously now it is like a world around like Baby Yoda is a thing, and Baby Yoda is gonna like what is season 3 eventually comes around. Like it might be just called Mandalorian season 3. Nah, it's Baby Yoda season 3 sort of thing. But right now, I'm happy with the usage, and it was an improvement from last episode, I would say.
Yeah, and then looking forward to the next episode, Chapter 12. What are your hopes and dreams for this next episode? I'm assuming that Mando is just, we end this one with him going off into space to, assumedly, come to Ahsoka. I'm going to say now, I just hope that he doesn't run into any interruptions. I think I don't want the Razor Crest to like make a funny like chitty bang bang noise, and then it breaks down, and he has to get towed to the nearest station, and then he doesn't have enough like liquid money to pay for anything. I want this to actually, be something that he gets there fast, because we've got a real sense of momentum with the show now, and I don't want it to lose it. I'm looking forward to seeing Ahsoka. I'm fingers crossed that Sabine will make an appearance as well. But yeah, I feel as though this episode here was where season 2 kind of finally arrived.
It's weird because there's so many elements to this now. There's so many characters. Like I was thinking in my head, like, do I want a Moff Gideon episode? Like, and again, I do. It is one of my gripes when shows start building momentum. Like that, when some shows do this, especially towards the end of a season, and then we get a flashback episode, which is always nice and warranted. But they always seem to be placed in the wrong time. Like right now, I'd say give me like a Moff Gideon episode almost. But then does that now that they've name dropped?
I'll be down for that.
Like. I'd be happy with that if he went to where Ahsoka was and she wasn't there. But if we have a Moff Gideon episode and then Din Djarin arrives at the end, we get Ahsoka. I'm split because these episodes all seem so short as well. But I think at some point I need a Moff Gideon episode. And I feel like this show could almost survive by having like say 5 minutes of Din Djarin in it and then cut into other stuff almost now. It's weird saying that, but then I feel like the show will go from strength to strengths, and it doesn't always have to rely on the central character.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, let us know what you thought of this week's Mandalorian episode down in the comments below, or reach out to us on social media if you have been listening. Remember, you can find more What Culture Star Wars content on What Culture Star Wars. Please go check us out if you haven't already. It's a brand new channel. We've got all sorts of stuff dedicated to the galaxy far, far away, and plenty of more things to come. But as always, I have been Ewan. You can catch me on Twitter if you'd like to, at Ewan Ruins Things. And today I was joined by Ben Roy Turner, who you can follow on Twitter
at Ben Roy Turner.
And we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
This is the way.
This is the way.